What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Above Board podcast. And I'm excited today because we have Rainah Fitzgerald back on the show. We talked earlier this year about our words of the year, which was gain and grounded. So we're doing a podcast takeover and a revisit. How you doing, Rainah?
I'm doing really good, John. How are you doing today?
Are you feeling grounded?
Do I sound grounded?
You sound very calm. You sound like you're doing a better job with your word than I'm doing with my word. And so that's what this check-in is all about, is to see our progress, talk about it, talk about next year. When this airs, it'll be kind of like end of year, I think, for 2025, 2024. So, yeah, how are we feeling?
Man, I'm feeling good, actually. I am very grateful for our practice of making this a live thing at the beginning of 2024, because I do feel like there is a certain responsibility to be upheld with that. And ever since then, I've kept my sticky note here, grounded, and it's just been a really, honestly, I will say in years past, I've never felt fond towards a word, especially a word for the year, because they feel daunting. But this year and the ending this year with grounded, I feel very fond towards this word. So
That's exciting. I feel the complete opposite about my word, but we'll talk about that in a second. Let's keep going there. So what are some things that you did, or just explain to everybody as a recap for those who maybe didn't listen to the episode? Which, if you go back, this was the first one. I can't remember episode number, but this was the first one we did in 2024, probably like end of January. But give a recap on grounded, and then maybe a couple, just like one or two things that you felt like you put into practice as a result of that word being your meaningful word of the year.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was episode 101, which I won't forget. And the whole reason behind coming to the word grounded for 2024 was because I was a mess. It felt like in mostly mentally. I felt like I was having a battle between my brain and my heart and the things that I wanted to do all the time. And I think one of the things I kept saying during that episode was that there was just so much on my plate the year prior, and I kept saying yes to things. And I was realizing that I was overwhelming myself without knowing until, time and months later. And so when I got to those overwhelmed periods, I realized, well, now I don't know how to say no and back out. And that was a really grounding experience for me, having to sit with those thoughts and realize that, I can say no, and I can, not do all the things that I want to do, which is hard. But maybe now I need to shift my mindset to be more of, maybe let's think about things before we jump into them. Like, maybe let's take a second, take a beat, really realize, is what I'm going to do next going to be intentional to my life and not just help me, but help others, and not just something that I'm rushing through the thought process of. So that's how I landed on grounded. And I do feel like it served me well this year. So to answer your other question, some things that you gave me the idea during episode 101 when you were talking about gain and how you reflect. And so Mackenzie,
Shout out to Mac.
She's our coworker, but she's also one of my best friends. And she got me the 5-minute journal at some point this year. And this has been really good for me in the morning, super quick, to reflect on the things that I'm grateful for, because in turn, when you know the things that you're grateful for, you sit and you want to be with those things more. So that was also helpful during all of my thought processes of, what do I want to do next? What book do I want to read next? Why do I want to read that book? Is this friendship serving me? Why is it serving me? Because it's filling my cup, and, all those kinds of things. So grounding was also a reflective journey, and I'm glad that I gave myself the space to think more on all the things. So,
There's probably a lot in there. So as well, like just lessons learned. I imagine saying, let's say for example, you saying no to something, or you had mentioned like evaluating friendships and stuff, and like saying no to people is really hard. So identifying, like maybe having the confidence to say no instead of being a yes person. That's got to be good. But then also, once you kind of go through the anchor word of ground of being grounded, and then once with that being the lead point of view, and then once you go through this litmus test of like, okay, well, I'm going to do this thing because it serves me, then my guess is you do it with a high degree of intentionality versus just saying yes to everything and kind of all over the place, which I know that feeling for sure. But once you really look at it through that lens, did you notice that to be the case? And if also, would you mind, is there an example that you can think of that you'd share with the audience of like, this is something that I put through that litmus test of decision making and I decided to move forward with it, and it was great because I was really intentional with it?
yeah. Yeah. So let me think. Well, I
We should have
know.
talked about it on the pre-call. Getting
Well,
the
I
real raw
know.
answer here.
Yes. I know that also one of the things that I had said was that there had been a lot of good, steady things in my life that I hadn't realized before. I kept adding new things onto the plate, but once I realized, once I took a step back and realized all the things that I'm involved in, I one of the biggest things was Candor Path, being here almost 3 years now, alongside the book club that I've been hosting for almost 3 years now, realizing how steady those things were in my life and wanting to give them more time and energy. I think that that was something that it wasn't a new thing, but it was, I have these beautiful things that I want to keep giving towards and be way more intentional with. So I will say that's kind of like a yes and no to your question. As far as like new things in life, Patrick and I made more space for traveling because that's something that's really important to me, and I love learning and I love feeling cultured and I love just getting in the things. And we traveled so much this year, and if I was too involved in any other sort of things, I don't think we would have really made the time for traveling and quite literally the finances for it too. And so that's been a really beautiful discovery, and we traveled for the first time internationally together, and I want to go back already. And that's something that I've learned about myself through this year of being grounded. And even during like those times and being there, like remembering this word grounded, it felt like, oh, I'm not going to this place to just try all the things, see all the sights. It was, I want to go here and I want to be here. I want to sit in the grass, and I want to read a book that feels like it is like parallel to what experience I'm having, and it just was the best. There's a lot of stories that can come from that, but yeah.
How do you think this takes shape for next year? How do you move into 2025 with this idea in mind? And you don't have to like change your word, or maybe you do, but what do you think are next steps for this for you?
Yeah, I think I already hinted at it a little bit. There's been a few words as a subset from grounded that I feel like have popped into my head. One of them being be, be. So the art of being. Another word that can kind of fold into that is rest. I really believe in rest, but not just like sit on your couch, lazy rest. I think that everybody has a different version of their rest and means something different to me than the next person. So rest. And then I feel like an ever evolving, ever present word in my life is always intentionality. It
Mm,
just is always there. I think I say it at least once a day.
yeah,
So,
cool. I like
yeah.
that. Ours
Yeah.
are like stark opposites. Mine's like grow, grind, hustle, build. I realized for me, like my word was gain, and it was kind of on the heels of the book, the gap and the gain. So this idea of like living in the gap and always wanting more, and not feeling like you've ever done enough versus being in the gain and kind of being reflective and appreciative. And we talked about how like our words were pretty similar, even though they were different words, kind of have like similar meanings, similar intentionalities behind them. I think I didn't do well this year. I actually re-listened to the podcast today, as a matter of fact, and I was like, oh, those are good points. Well, I should do that. So it's funny, like 12 months later, I'm sitting here like, yeah, and that's what I've being reflective on it, realized like life is just this journey where you're always, for me anyway, like I am big into progress and growth and building and getting better. So it's never constant, and there's just always things to be working on. And so as I reflect on it this past month, I kind of had like a busy like month and a half or so. And so I'm like, oh, I want to spend more time with the kids. And so I'm listening to the podcast, and I was like talking about that in January, and here I am. But for me, like life ebbs and flows. I got that during the summer. I spent, it's and that's definitely my version of balance. I realize it's like this stark contrast of like doing one thing really hard for a while and then flipping the script and then doing something else, then resting really, really hard. I rest better than anybody can rest. And so I was reflective on listening to the podcast, thinking like, wow, I got a long way to go. I didn't even, but that's okay, I
But
think.
isn't that the practice though?
Mm.
Like it's not for you to the reason it was a word for the year is not to become an expert at it. It was to practice it. And you got to practice it as much as you could. And even though it wasn't necessarily like at the forefront of your mind at certain seasons of the year, it still popped up. It was still a thought in general. And that's what I think is so beautiful about a word for the year. It's not like this New Year's goal that, like, if you don't finish it, you can't mark it off the list. It's like a word for the year that you get to sit with and remember. And then hopefully you just keep bringing it into your life. Like, it's just supposed to be a practice. And so, even though you didn't what you think, I think you did great. Even though you don't think that you perfected this word, I think that it's still a good practice to sit and be like, maybe I could be better at that, but it doesn't stop here. I can still bring that into 2025, and maybe it's in a different way too,
Mm.
and it evolves. So,
You alluded to this a moment ago, but the like putting this out into the world and doing a podcast about this, it sounded like it created like a different level of accountability for you, which Matt and I talked about this on the last podcast. Like sometimes on this show I'll say things because I feel like, I don't know, it's good to say it out loud. It's good for that to go out into the world and to like really commit to it versus privately saying like, oh yeah, I'm going to do XYZ, and then you just never do it and you feel kind of bad. Did you find that to be the case? Like, do you feel like it gave you that extra level of commitment because we did a podcast about it?
yes, but I also think that last year and what the circumstances that led to the word really made it more prevalent in my life, and that I needed it more this year. And so even though I put it out for accountability on here, I still feel like even if I didn't do that, it would have still kept popping up. I mean, it's like I have tattoos. I'm like, I would be fine getting a grounded tattoo now, like at this point, because I talk about it so much. And I think also continuing the conversation after the podcast helped me so much. And it wasn't ever like, I'm grounded. It's like, I'm a mess and I need to like keep bringing myself down. I need to keep thinking what I'm thinking, but let's get to a space where you like sit in it more and not just go from a thought to a thought, or a role to a role, or whatever that is. Like, let's just like be with this thing in front of you, or with this person in front of you. And so I think it would have kept coming either way.
I like that. I this just hit me while you were explaining this, but I think my word for the next year is going to be consistency. I'm sure I
Mm.
can come up with a better word, better buzzword, but I think consistency in that practice, or just consistency in showing up for yourself. Like I I like that word because this is something I pride myself on. I do pride myself on the ability to just show up and keep taking my licks and getting beat up, and like I could go back to like even like being a kid, being a student in school, playing sports. Like I prided myself on just like showing up. And we talk about that a lot on this podcast, that like just that's genuinely half the battle. Some people hate that quote, like showing up is half the battle, but I really do think it is. And maybe that's showing up for yourself, or showing up for however, if it's consistency and continuing to be grounded for you, Rainah, or if it's consistency in trying to find the gain in life, trying to find that perspective in life for me. Because you're right, like I've from your vantage point, you kind of made that comment like, why it looked like a year of growth for you in that way, and it definitely was. I mean, I did my 5-minute journal most days. One thing that I'm very like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like checklist oriented. So, I write my top 3 things that I want to do for the day, and I mean, I had like a streak of like 100 days where every day on my top 3 was to spend 30 minutes uninterrupted with the kids without my phone, and 30 minutes turned into an hour, and it wasn't like do it at this time of the day, but it was just at some point in the day do this. And I don't know, like that, writing that down and tracking it made me more intentional with the kids, and it did make me a better dad and more present with them, and it created memories. So I just think consistency it's just so, as you're probably hearing me say this, like it's very obvious of a word for me to say that that's what I wanted, because I just show up. That's what I like doing, is just
Yeah.
showing up again and again.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that. I was going to be like, if there's one person that I know that's very consistent, it's you. And that's not to say that it shouldn't be your word of the year, but I think you should celebrate that. And I
Mm.
think that you should make that the thing because you're good at it. And when you're not good at it, I guess maybe that could be, a moment of reflection, but I highly doubt that you are the most consistent person that I know. So,
Appreciate that. Let's start 75 hard on January 1st. Are you doing it? Are you going to do it? No, you're looking around like you're not going to
John,
do it. No? I think I'm
no,
I think I'm going to do it again. It's the
no,
year of consistency. What was more
please
consistent
God,
than doing
no,
365 days of 75 hard? No, I'm just kidding. Well, I'm,
no.
I'm partially kidding. I might. I don't know.
You're gonna do it in secret. If we know anything, you're gonna do it in secret.
I did that earlier this year. You know that. I think I made it. I forget how many days. I made it well over a week, like 9 days without anybody knowing that I was doing it. And then finally one day, Jackie was like, "Didn't you run this morning already?" I said, "Yeah, I did." And she's like, "Why are you going to work out again?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know. I just decided." And she's like, "Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute." And she figured it out. But
She
it
got on
took
you
it
really
took
quick.
9 days. I was good. It was
Yeah,
good.
yeah. You're like in the bathroom, like working out
Just doing push-ups and sit-ups in the bathroom for 45 minutes.
while you're
Um,
brushing your teeth.
yeah, yeah. Well, but my thing was, I mean, I failed. I didn't make it past, I don't know, day 12 or 13 or something like that. But if I ever do it again, in the spirit of everything we've talked about, I don't want it to sacrifice like family time.
Yeah.
And it did. Like the first time I did it, it definitely came with its sacrifices. It's like, where's dad? Oh, he's doing his second workout outside. He's gone for the next 45 minutes. What's dad? Why is like dad chugging water at the dinner table? Like he has like a half a gallon to go. Like what is this crazy behavior? So, my goal was for it to not impact. I mean, the amount of times we'd go on like a car ride, like, family's going to Disney, and I'm like, hey, dad's got to stop off at the Speedway to use
Hmm.
the restroom because I just chugged a half a gallon before we got in the car, you know.
Yeah, I will say I know we're talking about the words that we want to do for next year, but if there's any word I've ever been scared of, it's discipline. And I think that you could teach me a lot about discipline, but that word is daunting. I am like very much I like a routine, but a routine that means that I have to do it every day, no matter how I'm feeling physically, mentally, emotionally. That's where it's hard because I really like to think that I listen to what my body's telling me or what my brain's telling me or, all these different things, which is a hard thing to do to get all of those combined. But I feel like discipline is the hardest word in the book for me, aside from balance. But that's
But
kind of
that's where growth happens though. Like it feels so good. You're so proud of yourself when I mean like okay, so that whole 75 hard challenge, a lot of people think it's a fitness thing. It is straight up I would describe it as this is a discipline challenge. And because you have to read 10 pages of a book a day for on like personal development or self-help. It's not just a workout thing.
yeah,
The physical transformation that you maybe experience as a result of it is nice because it's a maybe an affirmation that like you see changes in the mirror, but like the changes that's happening in your brain is like I've never felt so proud than when I was on day not completing day 75, but on day like 57, and it's 10 o'clock at night, and I'm like I'm just gonna give up, and then Jackie's like, "Yo, you're so far, you can't do it. Go like let's go for a walk right now." And we're going for a walk at 10:30 at night, and I complete day 57 because of her. And so it's cool because then people like around you really start championing that thing too. I love the word discipline as I mean it doesn't need to be your word of the year, but for a lot of people, I think a lot of people struggle with discipline and they go through like cycles of good streaks. And then Ed Milet talks about this a lot. It's like you're this internal thermostat. Like we all have this internal thermostat of this temperature that we're comfortable with. And then, maybe New Year's resolution time, January, whatever, we kind of like dial that thermostat up because we're trying to lean into it a little bit and press in a little bit. And then we have these like self-sabotaging habits where you're like, oh, I had a really good week. I'm going to have a rot night. Or I had a really good week. I'm going to like, have a glass of wine and eat some cheesecake. And then you just kind of set that thermostat back to your normal temperature.
right.
And I think discipline allows you to kind of just move that thermostat higher and then stay there. Because like I ebb and flow now. I mean, I'm not doing 75 hard right now, and I failed at it this year. I did it last year, but as a result of it, it definitely like stepped me up into. So when you think of like consistency, and you say you think of me there, it's not. It's because of some of those things I've done to like toughen my mind, which I know is like a weird conversation that we're tracking towards. But here's what I want to say. If you being grounded in this, and then think through the decision and don't say yes just to say yes. And you already want to say no because I could tell your reaction before. But I will do it with you if you do. If I will do 75 hard with you, but you decide if and if you say yes, you decide when, and then I'm there. I'm in.
This is your ploy so that you can do it with having Megan be okay with it because
Yes.
Victory knows Megan is like no 75 hard.
Yeah.
I will tell you when I want to do it, but I want to do it in a different way. I know that sounds weird and that's like probably not easy for you either, but I think that some things are a bit outrageous about it. And I would like to just take it down one notch. That's just my opinion.
Okay.
And then somebody like from 75 hard comes on this and they're like, screw you. And I'm like,
Oh no, that's a thing. I'm in the Facebook group or whatever, and they talk about it. Like someone's like, oh, I only want to drink a liter of water, not a gallon of water, and they're like, that's 75 soft.
I'm fine with the 75 soft. Like I read most days anyways. That's on lock. It's the working out twice a day. I can barely work out once a day. Like I am heavily involved in our community and Young Life and things like that, that my time goes towards those things more than it does like trying to get a 45-minute workout in. And I'm just not sorry about that.
Yeah. The only thing I'll say in rebuttal to that is because I thought that too. And then you like somehow after about 10 to 15 days into it, it becomes so normal and you're like, I don't know, like you just find a way and I'm so locked in when I do that challenge and I feel like I get so much more done And the irony is like 90 minutes of my day are being taken away from me because I'm working out while I'm doing these things, like instead of other things. And yet I still get more done. And I think there's just a mental acuity that happens because you're just like sharpened a little bit when you do it. But oh man, the amount of times, like yesterday, I got a 45-minute walk in while talking to you, Rainah. So it was like the part of it is how can I stack habits? So I'll find moments in my day where I'm like, all right, I know I'm not going to get this nice run in, a nice long run in, or like a heavy workout in, but I got to move my body. So I'm going to take these 3 calls, put my AirPods in and go for a walk and then do it, which like I said, I did with you yesterday. So like you find that you can stack those habits. I've taken my kids to the park in a weighted vest and I'm doing air squats and push up like a total psychopath, total nutcase. I look nuts. But
Yeah.
you find it, and it's
The more we talk about it, the more I realize like it's not the surface level of it that I don't really want to do. It's that I genuinely fear failure, and that's just something that I feel like in a way, depending on what season I'm in, I just have to be aware of what I'm getting myself into, because if I know it's not a good season to start something like that, the failure will feel worse. And I just know that about myself. And I've tried 75 hard before twice and I failed both times and I didn't take it well. Like if anything, I feel like it kind of hurt me more than it helped me at that point. So that's where I'm like, I know what I would be getting myself into. I just need to like, I'll know. Because I'll know when it's time. And I'll
right.
let you know when it's
Okay.
time, but definitely not right now.
I'll be ready. I'm just gonna do
I
it
know you are.
365 days next year. So whenever you start, I'm gonna be like, yeah, I'm on day 1 also.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, I didn't know if you wanted to wrap soon, but before we wrapped, you know how I was saying earlier my thoughts of like what words for the year could be for 2025. Well, rest is possibly one of them, which is ironic as we're talking about the 75 hard. And rest, there was this quote that Patrick posted the other day that it just hit so hard. And I just want to say it really fast if that's okay. It says, sometimes rest is the most courageous work of all. And I think that is, people should think about that more.
Yeah.
I love that.
I do too. I'm sending serious mixed signals on this podcast, I think.
Yeah, we
I
are.
was like, discipline, consistency, and rest. But that could be consistency and discipline in rest.
But
And
that's
it
fine.
is. It is. It totally is. And like I mentioned earlier, that's a little bit of my version of balance is I go really hard for stints and then I rest for stints. And that's the way I've learned. That's just the way that I operate. And I kind of lean into it now. What were you
But
going to say?
but I believe that your version of rest is like working out, taking a moment away, going on a walk. Whereas like my version of rest is like reading a book and having music playing in the background for like an hour, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And Patrick's version of rest is going to hang out with friends. So I feel like rest can be subjective to what your life is. So if for you, I don't know if 75 hard is technically rest, but if for you going and working out is a form of rest, that's fine too. But like the fact that you're taking a courageous step to be like, I want to do this for me because I know it's going to fill my cup and then it's going to spread outward. Like you're a better person afterwards because you took a moment of rest, not you laying on your couch and sleeping for
Yeah.
9 hours, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that. Tracy Weiss, shout out to Tracy, who's been on the show. She's coached me through some of that stuff. She was our Enneagram expert. She's coached, I think, just about everybody on our team at some point in some fashion. And she said, I think we did a 30-day exercise where I wasn't allowed to wear my Whoop band. And I wasn't allowed to, when I would wake up at like 5 and I'm like, I got to go work out. Because what happens is my mind races about work stuff. And then how I fix that is I go work out. Like I just go exercise. Good endorphins, increases like, nice chemical release in the brain. It feels good. And she's like, you got to find a different way because your body is tired. Like your body is like not recovering. You're working out like 7 days a week. And I'm not proud of it. I'm saying this like, I know, whatever. It's just a silly thing. But, and she's like, you need, spend 30 days of, when you wake up, you do a meditation practice instead. And I struggle with it mightily. So like your version of rest that you said, which is like relaxation, reading a good book and listening to music, I struggle with that because when I do that, my mind is in this like hyper dry, like hyperactive, like I gotta go. I can't. I gotta go do something productive. I have to. And if I'm not, what am I doing? And so it took me a while with Tracy to kind of take a step back and realize like being productive could also be giving your body a chance to rest. So it's all about finding and striking that balance, which I think this is a fun conversation because we definitely did kind of go throughout this. I think the word consistency is still going to be the theme though for me because it could be consistency in any of those habits. Anything that's serving you positively. And by the way, the 75 hard thing you mentioned, failed at it twice and that bothered you so much. I think that's where growth exists. I mean, we gotta at least acknowledge that. Matt loves saying failure is an option. And I think, I failed it. I failed that challenge at least twice as well, if not more, if I'm not mistaken. First time I did it, I failed it. On day 18, I'll never forget it. I'll never forget how frustrated I was, same as you. And I didn't revisit it until an entire year later. And that's when I finally completed it. So it's like, you learn when you fall and pick yourself back up again. And that's a micro failure, by the way. I mean, that's like failed 75 hard. So what? You start again, like anytime you want to. But I just want to acknowledge that the growth and learning that comes with failure. I know that's cliche. What do they say? Like there's no failures only. There's like that quote about failure and how it's only like learning. But I believe in that though. I really believe. Do you believe in that?
I do. Yeah, okay. I do. I think that there's a lot of things I've failed in and grown from. I just think I don't know. I think it depends on your person, like who you are, your personality, what next steps you want to take. And for me, after failing something like that or failing other things, most of the time I find within myself that it's because I need to be more grounded.
Amen to that. Yes, queen, as they say. I'm trying to get that to catch on in my household. I've been saying that a lot lately because we say it internally at Canterpath. But in the spirit of all this was a really fun conversation. I think we've left a lot of the listeners super confused because we talked about grounded, discipline, consistency, resting. But that's just life, baby. That's life. I mean, and we're talking through it and learning. What do you think is where do we go from here? Because we're trying to, in the spirit of consistency, trying to keep the podcast consistent. But where do we go from here? Do we keep talking about this on the podcast? What do you think?
I mean, I think so. I think to a certain degree, even though you call it confusing, I think it's just a dynamic podcast. And I think that it's going to strike a lot of chords for certain people. So hopefully someone here listening felt like they could connect in any way, even if that's because we went all over the place. I think that that's super relatable. So I say we keep it going. I say we keep revisiting it. I can't believe it's already been a year. I mean, and before that, it was a year that I was on the podcast. So I'm just making a yearly debut at this point. And
bingo.
I chop my hair and everything for it. So
yes, that's true. Yeah, it's a new look for Rainah. I like the use of the word dynamic. The dynamic and really just the opposing. These are in some instances feel like opposing ideas, like discipline and rest, for example, but they're really not. They very much go hand in hand. So I think we keep talking about it, and we got to have you on before another year from now. So we'll have you back on and we'll talk about it. But thank you, as always, to the listeners. Thank you, Rainah, for joining us today on the podcast. If you don't know this, hopefully you do by now, but you can also watch this podcast. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel at Canterpath. Give us a watch, give us a like, a follow. We love doing these episodes, and we're trying to stay consistent in 2025. That's our word of the year. So until next week, we will see you then. Have a great week. See ya. Bye.